Hello there, people of the internet. I'm literally just out here plinking at the range, and while I'm out here, I was using my SKS, or rather, I'm about to use my SKS, and I grabbed this thing after I had put my AK away, and I just kind of started thinking as to why the SKS might potentially be a better option than the AK. And then I started thinking about rolls of rifles and what it is that you would do with them. And I determined that the SKS would make a better survival rifle versus the AK, which would make a better fighting rifle. Now, of course, you could kind of force one into the role of the other, and each has their pros and cons. However, that being said, the SKS, just because in a survival situation, especially if you're in a survival situation where you're not getting resupplied, and I've done the math on this in a previous video if you want to go watch that, but if you carry the same amount of weight of ammunition, you can carry 50% more ammunition with SKS ammo on stripper clips than you can AK ammo inside of magazines. Not only that, but those little stripper clips are significantly easier to carry around than magazines. So you're just going to be able to carry more ammunition for the SKS, and if you're not using it as a fighting rifle, then the downsides of the SKS don't really matter all that much. What matters is that you have a fairly decent effective cartridge for your survival situation, and you're able to carry very many of these fairly decent cartridges. Now, the downsides of the AK in terms of that survival situation is you're going to be carrying less ammunition for that same amount of weight. However, in a fighting sort of situation, the AK is oftentimes higher capacity and easier to carry magazines. A lot of people will bring up the aftermarket SKS magazines that hold 30 rounds. Those have giant nubs on them, and they're very difficult to reload, especially if you're under stress. Believe me whenever I say the AK magazine is definitely the superior magazine system, and that higher capacity with superior reloading sort of capabilities is definitely going to be a far better option in terms of being used as a fighting rifle than the SKS. And for the people who think the SKS is the superior fighting rifle, those are people who have very, very little experience with firearms, is what that tells me. And they're probably people who have never been shot at before by somebody who has either an AK or an AR. Because when somebody has that rifle with that higher capacity and they're going bang, 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 bang in your direction, you don't want to be sitting in whatever trench it is that you're sitting in trying to fumble with your SKS magazine or stripper clips to shove rounds into your magazine, especially under stress, especially under fire, and you only got 10 rounds of ammunition and you can't put down nearly as much fire as the dude can who's firing at you with that better firearms platform. There's a reason why ARs and AKs are the most predominant fighting rifle out there. However, that being said, in terms of survival rifles, there's a lot more leeway with what it is that you can do, because most of the time in survival, your life isn't at immediate risk and you're not needing to defend yourself from somebody who has a better rifle capability. On top of that, I'd say the biggest benefit is probably going to be that you're carrying more ammunition for your SKS than you would for your AK. Like I said, both of these platforms can kind of be pushed into the role of either fighting rifle or survival rifle, but the SKS makes a piss-poor fighting rifle in a modern-day context, and the AK really does not make that great of a survival rifle if you're not getting resupplied, just because of your lack of ammunition that you'll be able to carry on person in comparison to the weight of what you'd be able to carry with that SKS. So, two very distinctive roles, two very, very different platforms for very, very different jobs. A lot of people try to force one rifle into both roles, and that's just not ideal. That's just not going to be a good case. I know a lot of people will say, well, I use my AR and it will make a great survival rifle and fighting rifle. And to an extent, I would reckon to agree with you. But the AR as a survival rifle, I know the 223 is a very underrated cartridge in terms of what people believe that it is capable of, but it still has its limitations. The people who want to use that as a survival rifle, I would recommend getting a batch of ammunition that is, say, heavier weight, 77 grain, maybe even 85 grain if you're rocking a 1-in-7 twist barrel. And I would definitely recommend using a 20-inch barrel. Most people are going to go with 16-inch barrels, though, for their AR-15s. But I would definitely recommend a 20-inch barrel so you get as much capability out of that cartridge as possible. However, that being said, the 223 is still a 223. Like, 85 grain bullet in a 223 is really, really heavy, but an 85 grain bullet in, say, a 30 cal is really, really, really lightweight and considered anemic and pathetic. It is not something that you would want to do more than, say, hunting. Personally, I'd probably hunt small, medium game with it. I wouldn't necessarily go after your larger things with a 223. And I definitely would not want to trust a 223 for active defense against a larger critter. I have no doubts that you'll be able to put that critter down, but the goal would be to put that critter down before it puts you down. You got to immediately stop that threat. And man, the 223 just does not lend itself very well to being that survival cartridge versus some of the other platforms that are out there. What is this? This is a ramrod of some kind. Oh, I'm gonna have to bring this back inside. But anyway, trying to force one rifle into two specific roles for two specific jobs is not an ideal thing. And you can kind of pull that off. People lean more towards having a fighting rifle that can be pushed into the role of survival, but there's a lot of people out there who want to have a survival type rifle that they could potentially use to fight in the event that they need to. And I feel like that's probably the more logical solution, because the likelihood of you needing a rifle to survive versus a rifle to fight, well, natural disasters and whatnot occur pretty gosh darn regularly here in the US, and there's a lot of things happening on the political spectrum. The likelihood of you having to use a rifle to survive versus to fight, you're more than likely going to end up having to use a rifle to survive. A lot of people yell at me because they're like, you've never been in a survival situation. I live in North Florida. Like, a year ago, or 2 years ago at this point, wow, it's been a minute. We ended up having a really bad hurricane that came through, knocked out power, took out the town, roads were blocked, there was water everywhere, trees, debris, destroyed buildings, the National Guard got called out. It was really, really bad up here. And we ended up spending probably about a month off-grid, no resupply, couldn't even drive to town. We had what we had. And at that particular time, I was using a 9mm carbine to go out to those woods. Right there, we got lots and lots of woods over here at this house. And I got all sorts of critters and all sorts of stuff out there. And even during that really, really bad time here in North Florida, I don't think that there were any gunfights. I don't think that anyone was mounting up plate carriers and ARs to go out and steal supplies from anyone. So I guess that things would have to get really, really bad, because things were really bad. I guess we have to add one more really into that sentence before we get to the point to where people are like, okay, I'm going to go out and do some really atrocious things to get resupplied. And that's kind of why people lean more towards the fighting rifles, I guess, because they are of that mindset. But the survival rifle, you can get away with a lot in terms of what it is that you might potentially want with a survival rifle. Like, what's another good example besides the SKS? Well, the Mosin Nagant, for example. The Mosin Nagant would make a really, really poor fighting rifle in a modern day context, but you know what? You get yourself a Mosin with one of those spam cans of 440 rounds, or even one of those crates that come with 2 spam cans, and dude, that will work as a survival rifle basically indefinitely. Like, that would do so well in terms of a survival rifle. You could essentially run on that forever. Like, the amount of things you would be able to take with that would keep you going for quite a considerable amount of time. And that is an example of a good survival rifle. If you ended up going with, say, a Mauser, and you got yourself some surplus Mauser ammunition, well, Mauser 8mm ammunition that is surplus has issues with reliability a lot of the times because of how it was stored. But the Spam Can 7.62x54R will pretty much last forever, especially inside that Spam Can. And you could get it and store it away for a rainy day for just in case purposes. And even if you go back to it 50 years later because it's, I don't know, sitting in your garage or something, odds are it's probably still going to work well enough. it's probably gonna be in pretty good shape and pretty good condition, especially in comparison to any 8mm Mauser surplus that might just be sitting out in the open. As a matter of fact, it's not really survival situation related, but it's a funny story. I was out here about a year ago, approximately, give or take, with this particular SKS, and I was filming a video just like I am right now. And I had 5 rounds of ammo with me that I sent down range, and whenever I had fired those, I had done the outro of the video, and I was like, all right, great, fantastic. And you know what happened? Probably a good 60-pound pig came running out of the woods right here, ran right in front of my gun range, stopped right there at the car. I guess he was inspecting it or something. But dude, I had this live pig, and for those who watch the channel, I love hunting boar and pig. It's just one of the things I really enjoy doing. I had this live pig that was just kind of hanging out right there at my gun range. I was here with my SKS, no ammo. And that's just one of those things that I kick myself in the butt for all of the time, because it was comical. It was hilarious how that went down. So SKS, I got 5 rounds of 7.62 by 39, and the reason why I have 5 rounds and not 10 rounds is because this is literally my last 5 rounds, unless I want to open up another can of ammo. I don't really want to do that. So 5 rounds of ammunition it is. Let's send this down range here. Oh, hold on. I got the safety. There we go. Hold on. I think that was high. There we go. That's more like it. Oh no! Look at that. That is a malfunction right there. And that's alright. This poor little gun is 1953. That's what, 70 years old? 70 something years old at this point? Considering how old this little SKS is and how much I've done with it and how much I've done to it, oh boy. I'm surprised it still fires. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourselves a fantastic day. That wind feels really good, but I bet it's hell on the audio. I will see you guys on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.